Good morning, everyone, and thanks for taking time to join us. Really appreciate you attending our very first Meet the CEO event. And this is part of our new series that we are launching as of today. So very happy to have our guest, very first guest, Scott Jean. Just real quick, if you don't know me, I'm Tiffany Tauschek, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at the partnership. And we decided to create this event as a way for new CEOs who, as they're taking the leadership reins of companies and organizations in Greater Des Moines, we want to make sure that they're getting peer-to-peer networking opportunities, which right now can be a challenge, as we know. So wanted to give you all the opportunity to connect with Scott Jean specifically today. So Scott Jean is president and CEO of EMC Insurance Companies. And I'm going to just touch on a brief bio, and then we'll go into asking Scott a little bit more about his background. And then, of course, open it up for Q&A, because we want to give you all the opportunity to introduce yourselves to Scott and ask questions to him directly as well. So this is pretty informal. Want to make sure that this is more of a free-flowing conversation. So again, thanks for joining us. So a little bit about Scott Jean. Scott joined EMC as an actuary in 1991. He was promoted to vice president and chief actuary in 2009 and executive vice president in 2015. In 2018, Scott moved into the position of Executive Vice President of Finance and Strategy, overseeing accounting, actuary, corporate risk management, EMC reinsurance, information technology, investments, corporate strategy, and innovation. He was promoted to President on January 3rd of this year, 2020, and then to CEO on March 11th of this year. So great timing, Scott. Scott received a bachelor's degree in mathematics from Iowa State University and is a fellow of the Casualty Actuarial Society and a member of the American Academy of Actuaries. Scott and his wife, Natasha, have 5 kids, and they live in West Des Moines. So now we're going to ask Scott some questions and get to know him a little bit better. So Scott, first out of the gates here, tell us a little bit about yourself in your own words.
Thank you, Tiffany. I think it's a great opportunity to have an event like this, allow people to meet the new CEOs and even some of the more seasoned CEOs. So we'll see how this goes over time. But I do appreciate this opportunity. And I love everything the Des Moines Partnership is doing, and it's exciting to be a greater part of that than what I had been in the past, and I'm just having the opportunity to see what's going on within our community. You cover a lot of the basics of my career, where I've gone, and it's kind of the factual side. But a couple of things you don't know is that I moved to Des Moines when I was 8 years old. And when I came to Des Moines, my father actually started the actuarial department at EMC. So that was my first experience to actuaries and my first experience to EMC. I actually grew up at EMC, hung out with actuaries. I helped my dad with the computer network on the weekend, and so I was really hanging out at EMC since I was 8 years old. I actually had decided I didn't want to become an actuary. I saw the time they spent, the amount of time they spent studying for exams, and determined I didn't want to do that to myself. So I chose not to become an actuary. But I knew I was good at math, so I went and got a math degree. And then I was like, well, what am I going to do with a math degree? I guess I'll be an actuary. So I couldn't find anything else to do. So I ended up becoming an actuary at EMC. Now, as Tiffany mentioned, I do have 5 kids. They range in age from 7 to 22. My 22-year-old son lives over in Altoona. I've got an 18-year-old daughter who's away at college, who'll be coming home this Friday. Only seen her once since the semester started. She's a freshman over in Colorado. But bottom line is, what I love about my job right now is I love empowering people. I love helping them thrive. I love setting strategic direction and setting a course for the company, and then seeing and allowing people to align to that, getting excited about being part of something bigger than themselves. And my bucket is really filled by improving lives, focusing on that every day. How can I make a difference? How can I invest in the lives of people and see them transform, see them excited about something bigger than themselves?
Thank you, Scott. I did not know that about you. So it's interesting to learn that that you really got your start when you were very young
Yes.
with EMC. So given this event is it's invite only, it's only for top executives. Many may have an idea what it is like to run an organization, but tell us for you in your role what a day in the life of Scott Jean is like.
Well, since I took over on March 11th as CEO, and then I sent everyone home on March 12th, one word could really describe a day in the life of Scott, and that is Zoom. I do Zoom all day long. But on days when the partnership doesn't have a 7 o'clock in the morning meeting, I do try to run first thing in the morning with my wife. We'll get out, go over to the gym, run outside if the weather is good. So try to stay physically fit, get that exercise first thing in the morning, so I'm prepared for the day. It really does help me to get going. But then a couple of days a week, I've been heading down to the office downtown. Had a number of in-person meetings, but really most of my time is spent like I am now, sitting in my 22-year-old son's bedroom, who's moved out, talking to an inanimate laptop all day. That's my life right now.
Maybe not the way you expected to spend your first year as CEO.
Not exactly, but I can view some of the positives in all this as well. The I expected to be doing a lot of traveling, attending conferences all over the country, speaking around the country. And because of COVID, I've been home. And that has really allowed me to focus a lot more on EMC itself than what I had anticipated doing, which I can certainly view as a blessing. There are a lot of things that I've done this year that I may not have done or implemented when I did. We started all team member meetings every month, where we're bringing everyone together on Zoom, 2,400 employees across the country, and having kind of fireside chats about what's happening in the company, what's happening with COVID. For a while, I was doing a weekly Work from Home with Scott video series, where I was just talking about some of the difficulties that we were facing, try to introduce some fun into that process. And I just don't think, had it not been for COVID, that all these things would have come up. And I think what's happened is it's allowed us to create it's made me very real to our team. There were concerns having Bruce Kelly, who was CEO for many years, family kind of business, and there were concerns about people going to see Scott as a CEO. Well, Bruce kind of faded in the fabric. He's been staying home because of COVID, and I've been front and center on Zoom on an almost weekly basis with all of our team members. So it's really been a nice way to establish me as a CEO, but to also allow them to get to know me, to see the human side of me, and feel comfortable. One thing that I am really big on is building a culture of trust. And so even through COVID, we've got 16 branch offices around the country. We had a lot of branches that weren't real fond of people working remotely. They didn't have a high level of trust in their team to do so. But because of COVID, we have 96% of our team working remotely, and it kind of forced it on everyone to put their trust in their team and allow them to work from home. And it's worked very well. And so I think even the situation with COVID has allowed us to extend more trust, and people feel they're trusted. They feel like they're a larger part of the company than they were before because of some of the things that have happened since COVID.
Yeah, love that positivity, Scott. That's great. Your career, obviously full of many, many accomplishments, but we all know part of our journey and path are also some fumbles along the way. But as you look back and think about your career, can you share with us a couple of maybe defining moments that led you to where you're at today?
I certainly can. In that there's as I look back in my career, there aren't any major things that I could really point to and say, boy, this was a transition moment for me. For me, it's been a lot of little things. It's been a journey. It hasn't been pivotal moments, but it's been kind of a culmination of many different life experiences, people investing in me, people putting time into my own personal development that's helped me get to the point where I'm at today. I never aspired to be a CEO, and I can say that honestly. It was never it's anything that I had in my mind. I always viewed CEOs for the most part as being uh, command and control, someone who could come out and control a room, that could really drive and push things forward. And that didn't really fit me, and it didn't really align with my personality and how I wanted to lead. So I never really had that aspiration of being a CEO. But throughout my career, I began to notice what I call servant leadership. I saw people who were willing to dig in the dirt and get their hands dirty and really work to serve other people. And I noticed how people respond to that as well. The people that I followed, the people that I was really drawn to, weren't the power hungry, demanding leaders. What I respected most when I saw leaders were the ones who were willing to get down and really help out and serve in any way they could. I noticed a leader walked by in our building, and he picked up trash off the floor. He could have gone back to his office and he could have called someone and said, "Hey, there's some trash up here, come clean it up." And it really just struck me as a young employee. Wow, that was kind of cool to see a senior leader of the company willing to do whatever to make sure our company was a good place to be. Um, I was at a conference, an AM Best conference actually, and I saw a leader who was with someone else who was trying to plug in their phone at a conference, the big lobby where people were hanging out. Couldn't find an outlet, so a guy got down on his hands and knees and was crawling down on the ground, crawled underneath a sofa, and found a place to plug in this other guy's phone. I'm like, that's servant leadership. That's making a difference in the lives of someone. So, another example. This is I maybe shouldn't share this, but I'll share it. We had a branch manager meeting in Des Moines. It had leaders from all over the country who were there, and somehow we got a bat and had a bat flying around our conference room. I mean, this is a large room. We got probably 60, 70 people in there. And there's a bat flying around, and people don't know what to do. Well, Bruce Kelly gets up, he dumps out some ice and some pop from a tub, and he goes up and he takes the thing and he whacks the bat and gets it pinned to the floor in this tub until they got a box up there, got the thing outside and let it go. There aren't too many CEOs that would do that. And so all these things just really spoke to me about servant leadership and showing genuine concern for other people. So it kind of became clear to me over the years that leadership is not rank or position to be attained. It's really a service to be given. And so as I advanced in my career, I began to intentionally implementing some of these things, focusing on servant leadership, focusing on humility. If you've ever read Good to Great, Jim Collins' book, I'm not going to say I'm a level 5 leader, but I aspire to be a level 5 leader. And so throughout the course of my career, this is how I began to model my own leadership style, looking to be humble, looking to collaborate, to connect everyone to a goal, and to really create a level of trust. Something else I saw throughout my career was people who, the teams that really worked well together and the teams that didn't. And so another book that I really appreciated in my career was Five Dysfunctions of a Team by
Yes.
And it just talks about the first dysfunction of a team. That's by Patrick Lencioni. First dysfunction of a team is an absence of trust. The second dysfunction of a team is a lack of conflict. So that's one thing. Whenever we kick off a new team, I talk a lot about trust. I talk a lot about conflict. If we have 18 people in a room and we don't have conflict, we've got a problem. Because I guarantee that we don't have 18 people that all agree on everything. They have different opinions. If we're not having any conflict, that means people aren't sharing their opinions. We got to get past the Iowa nice, get past the EMC nice, and be willing to speak up. But in the end, we're going to walk away with a collaborative decision that we're all going to stand behind. And so then another book that had a big impact on me was The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey. And he talks about 4 cores of credibility: integrity, intent, competency, and results. He talks about 13 different behaviors of trust. And so these are things that I kicked off a national within EMC knowledge sharing network. We've had a couple hundred people go through this book. They have discussions on it, but they're really engaging with each other, talking about how they're applying these different principles in their life, trying to build that culture of trust within our company. And so, these are all things that, nothing major, nothing pivotal, but it's really helped me become the leader that I am today. One thing that I do every day is through coaching and working with my coach from Baton Global, who's been instrumental in my development. If you don't have an executive coach, I encourage every one of you to get one. It's an incredible experience and really helps me think through some things. But one thing my coach did was help me develop my own personal brand statement. With that brand statement is something that I look at every morning. That's one of the first things I do when I sit down in front of my inanimate computer. And I read through it, and then I look at my calendar. And then as I look at my calendar, I say, how can I implement any of these things today? How can I demonstrate my personal brand in every meeting that I attend? My personal brand is to be a confident and decisive servant leader that empowers people and improves lives by building trust, coaching, and connecting everyone through inclusivity to the vision of EMC. So as I look at that each day, I'm saying, well, how can I be a servant leader today? Is there an opportunity to do that? How can I empower people and not micromanage? How can I improve lives? How can I build trust today? And these things help me to be very intentional about building my brand. And my brand is somewhat who I am already, but also who I aspire to be.
Thank you so much for sharing. Five Dysfunctions of a Team. That's one of my favorite books as well. And the first time I mentioned that to some of my colleagues, I think it comes across like a negative book. It is not a negative book. It is a fantastic book, and it also talks about the power of vulnerability. So doing something like this, Scott, sharing some insider information behind the scenes, more personal information with a group of people that you're just getting to know is truly an example of leadership too. So thank you for sharing those book recommendations. We always love those. So Jay and I have been doing some job interviews with some job candidates lately. And so I apologize for this question, but it's top of mind simply because we've been asking this of others. Share with us a time that that you had to overcome a challenge and what that was and what you did to overcome it.
Oh, I'd really point to becoming CEO on March 11th. I was at a conference in Miami, AM Best conference, and it was really odd. 2,000 of my closest friends all shaking hands and sipping cocktails and doing the things you do at the conferences, and then getting on a plane and flying home, and then that night hearing the NBA season was canceled, and all these things that all happened very quickly, going to the office on March 12th. So I actually took over on March 11th, was in Miami on March 11th. My first day in the office was March 12th. Called everyone together, and we made the decision to send everyone home, not knowing for sure how we'd be able to do that. We had a lot of laptops rolled out to people, but we still had a lot of people with desktops also that could not work remotely. We had been using Zoom some, but never a full implementation of Zoom. And so the decision to look out for our team and send everyone home and hope for the best was a very, very challenging and difficult decision that in the end has worked out very well for us. But it was really something that took a lot of courage to make that decision as quickly as we did. And so that would be one major hurdle that I faced. But even throughout the course of the year, this has not been a good year for many respects, especially for an insurance company. Many of you may remember the derecho that came through. That happened to be EMC's largest catastrophe event ever by a factor of 3. We experienced a very large amount of loss as an insurance company from the damage that was done. Interesting story there, though. I actually had a meeting set up with Dan Houston that day, and he and I were Zooming having a discussion, and I'm sitting in my home office, and the tornado sirens are going off. And I'm like, Dan, what's going on? I said, I don't know. So we just kept talking and having more conversations, and tornado sirens went off again. I looked outside at the sunshine. I'm like, oh, they must be testing something. And I just had no idea. And then finally my wife came up and said, we need to head to the basement. I'm like, oh, okay. But I had no idea how big that was. And Dan was actually at the time getting ready to go out and visit. I figured all the details, but getting ready to go out and visit someone who had been with the company for many, many years, who's retiring. He was going to take her flowers that day as she was celebrating her retirement from the company. And so I didn't follow up with him to see how that went, but that was a good example of leadership from him that day too. But it was just interesting how meeting him for the first time and experiencing a derecho. So it's just been one of those years that has, it seems like every turn, every corner, there's been more and more things to deal with. Also as an insurance company with potential for COVID claims, fighting against business interruption insurance being applied to a pandemic, which would bankrupt the insurance industry, dealing with hurricanes, wildfires. It's just been a very unique year. And I can't imagine things being too much more unique in someone's first year as a CEO of an insurance company.
Wow. Well, I remember, Scott, the first time that I met you, it would have been, I think, in January, right after you assumed the role of president, and came in to meet with you and talk to you about the Central Iowa Water Trails project.
Yes.
And you, in that meeting, shared your love of running, just as you did here today, but also just being outdoors. And since then, you have already been demonstrating your commitment to our community through involvement and support. Would you be willing to share with us what sort of community projects or that you're passionate about, or community involvement that you have or are considering?
You know, I've volunteered at a lot of different things over the years. Nothing necessarily in a leadership position, but really trying to model servant leadership, just getting in and helping serve meals or doing that kind of stuff at various things around town. I am currently talking to a couple of nonprofit boards about serving on their boards of directors. But to be honest, most of my community involvement has been through serving at my church, doing various projects at my church. I've spent time in the past preaching and teaching. I've done a fair amount of counseling with people, talking through difficult things that they were facing, talking through divorce situations or dealing with family issues or kids. And so not necessarily your typical CEO route to serving in the community, but historically that's where I've spent a lot of my time.
Thanks for sharing, and thanks for all you do. You've been very actively involved in the partnership in your new role as well, and we really appreciate all the time that you've made to help us, advise us, and provide us with some input and feedback as well. Um, would you be willing to share with us a personal or professional story? I think the bat story is a pretty good one, but any others that maybe no one else would know otherwise if you wouldn't share it here today?
Well, you know, Tiffany, I don't really have that many what I would consider interesting stories, but you know, I can share a couple that are at least one, and one is the fact that I have only received paychecks from two different companies. The companies being Hardee's and EMC. So I got a job when I was, I think, 50 years old, working at Hardee's flipping burgers. Had one interview there and started the same day that I was interviewed. And then I got a job as an intern at EMC when I was a sophomore in high school. Interesting thing there, though. When I was working at Hardee's, I was used to working long days. I would work, it seemed like 15, 16-hour days, and I'd get a 15-minute break in the middle if I was lucky. I mean, it was a very long day standing on your feet. But then I got a job as an intern at EMC, and it was just interesting how things have changed over the years. But I was actually hired to create a database on a PC back in 1991. And so I walked in the first day, and they said, the guy said, "Well, there's your desk. Sit down." So I said, "Okay." And I said, "What do I do?" I was sitting in front of this what's called the terminal. He said, "Well, you just log on." I said, "Well, I don't have a username or password." He says, "Just use mine. Username's Tim-D, password's beer." Okay, well, great security at the time. So I logged on. I'm like, I still don't know what to do. And he said, "Well, you need to use that, or maybe you need that PK thing." I said, "The PK thing?" He said, "Yeah, it's around the corner of another desk, so everybody can use it." I'm like, "The PK thing." So I get up and I walk around the corner, and there's a PC. It's like, "Oh, PC. So you want me to use the PC?" So I sat down and started working on this database they wanted me to build. And a couple of guys come by. I felt like I had been sitting there 20 minutes, but a couple of guys come by and they say, "Coffee?" I'm like, "What?" They said, "Coffee break." I'm like, "Well, I know I just got here." "No, we're going to coffee break." "Okay." So I got up, went down to coffee break, and then we came back, and I felt like I had just started working again. And the guys come by again. "Lunch?" "I thought we just had lunch." "No, that was coffee. This is lunch." So did the same thing. The same thing happened in the afternoon, and it was just such a contrast working in the corporate world compared to working in a Hardee's. I'm like, I could probably get used to this whole corporate thing. Now, fortunately, the culture at EMC has shifted a little bit. We're not, in that coffee mode. We're not. Uh, we're all about getting the job done and having fun while we do it. But also, it's just been interesting to see that the culture shift and even the technology shift over the years at EMC.
Thank you for sharing. That's fantastic. Um, I know we have a group of CEOs, top execs that are also listening in here today and likely eager to ask you some questions. So if all of you could be ready, I'm going to ask a couple more questions, then we'll open it up. And I would just ask you to please introduce yourself before you ask the question. Make sure Scott gets to know you a little bit as well. So because you have been here since you were 8, right? Scott, I've been in Des Moines since you were 8. What do you see that has really changed since you were young, and what do we still need to change? What do we need to do differently as a region moving forward?
Well, certainly, we've seen great economic growth in the area. I've lived in Ankeny, and just to see Ankeny really explode. Waukee, was such a small town when I first arrived, and now it's a very large city. Um, I think it's been great to see the revitalization in downtown Des Moines. Now, I have a lot of concerns with what that looks like post-COVID, with people not being downtown and a lot of small businesses closing downtown and restaurants struggling or having already closed. Um, but to me, that's been one of the bigger things I've seen is that revitalization of downtown Des Moines. My wife moved here from out of state, and she's been very impressed just by the cleanness of our city, the quality of the roads in Iowa compared to even Nebraska or Missouri, where she had lived previously. So it's good to get an outside perspective too, as people move into our community. What do they see? What do they notice that's different from where they came from? I love Des Moines. I like to travel. I like to visit other cities, but when I do, I'm always very thankful to get home. And it's good for me, as I'm a very frustrated driver, and driving in Des Moines traffic, and coming from West Des Moines and hitting 22nd Street and having to slow down. It takes me 22 minutes to get to the office because of traffic, and then going to Chicago and taking 2.5 hours to get from the airport downtown. That's a good wake up call for me that I really appreciate and enjoy our community. Also visiting other areas. I in the past I've gone out to San Jose, California quite a bit, visiting with insurtech companies out there. And while there, I go out for a run. And one thing I like to do is pull little flyers out. And I ran by a house that was for sale. I think it was an 1,100 square foot house that was on the market for $1.6 million.
Yeah.
Something built in the 50s. And so just a great appreciation for the quality of living that we have, the cost of living that we have in Des Moines. We've really done a nice job as a community in creating a great place for people to live and to raise a family.
Thank you. We love Des Moines too, and again, really appreciate your leadership. Um, you have mentioned, Scott, quite a bit to us in here today, but also in prior conversations, just how important diversity, equity, inclusion work is to you, and wondering if you could touch on some of the strategies that you are starting to implement at EMC, or strategies that already were in the works regarding inclusivity at EMC.
Oh, we really started a big initiative 3 to 4 years ago, and it's been a journey. And to be honest, when we first started, I wasn't necessarily on board with what we were talking about. To me, diversity, equity, and inclusion was an initiative to just push down the white male and promote people who maybe weren't deserving. And that was just my initial reaction when I first heard about it. But as I began to learn more and to recognize and see some of the inequities that exist, I really became pretty passionate about pushing for change and seeing things change. And um, we spent a lot of time at EMC talking about our unconscious biases, beginning to dig in and understand what biases that we have, and recognize that we can't beat ourselves up for where we're at either. We've got to be on a journey. We got to be on a journey for improvement. And so through this whole process, I certainly got on board with creating a culture of diversity, equity, inclusion. We worked hard as a company to begin to get our leadership team on that same page, and then begin to get everyone across our company involved and engaged in those things. So a lot of it has been just talking, letting people hear my perspective on things, sharing some of the things that I personally am doing to focus on these. Having signed the Des Moines Partnership Pledge, a national pledge, which we recently announced, and I signed in my office and had a few photos taken, just to let people see my commitment to it. It's it is heartbreaking to see some of those things that people have experienced, and so I've spent a lot of time sitting down and talking to Black families and Black couples and Hispanics, trying to understand, help me understand your story, help me understand what you've experienced, and the reality is I can never understand. All I can do is look at and say, what can I do to help be part of the solution? EMC also hired, many of you may have met Lonnie Daphne. She's our director of diversity, equity, inclusion. She's doing a great job of educating and helping our team across the company get on board and understand where it is that we're headed. And it's something we really build into nearly every conversation that we have. It's I'm such a firm believer, especially in inclusion. I mean, we need to do a lot with diversity, we need to do a lot with equity, but even within our company, we need to do a lot on inclusion, giving everyone a voice, giving everyone the opportunity to bring their own self to work, have the freedom to speak up. When I talk about the 5 dysfunctions of a team, that's giving people a voice. If you don't feel the freedom to share a voice, we have a problem. And so we want to be inclusive of everyone, because I firmly believe that if we can have a diverse team that's equitable and give people a voice and include their opinions and get them inspired, that all I need to do is set the direction as a company, and people are going to line up and follow. And we're going to have a lot more success as a company if we can accomplish those things than if we are missing the mark on any aspect of diversity, equity, or inclusion.
Thank you. Thanks also for signing the CEO commitment to racial equity. We now have over 200 CEOs that have joined you in that, Scott. So thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask one more question before we open it up to the other leaders on this call to introduce themselves and ask you questions. I do have some fun questions for the very end here too, but you mentioned several times Bruce Kelly and the former CEO of EMC. Can you share with us how you've worked to maintain that relationship with Bruce while also helping to keep the organization moving forward under your leadership?
Well, I mean, to be honest, we haven't necessarily had a lot of communication since his retirement. He's because of COVID, he's been home. He is on our board of directors, so we do see each other through committee meetings or through board meetings. But he and I had worked together for many, many years, and just his the way he would carry himself, the way that he knew a lot of our team members was a great model for me. One story I can tell about Bruce. Shortly after becoming an executive vice president, I made a very, very tough decision to switch reinsurance brokers. And it was something that I began to evaluate quickly, and made that decision, had Bruce's support to do it. But the prior broker was not happy about the decision, and they wanted to talk to Bruce about it. And but Bruce wanted me in the office with him as we were talking about this. So we came walking in, and they were actually pretty rude. Burnt a bridge. The guy who was talking to both of us said, "Well, Scott, you're in the big leagues now. Are you sure you're up to the task of making a big decision like this?"
Oh gosh.
And Bruce just said, "This conversation's over," and he hung up on him. And he's like, "Okay, we're done." So I went back to my office, sat down, but I closed my door in my office, and I just sat there for a second, just kind of stunned, like, did I make the right decision? I can't believe like I was attacked that way and really challenged that way. About 10 minutes later, there's a knock at my door. Bruce comes walking in. He says, "Well, Scott, now that you're in the big leagues, I want you to know you hit a grand slam." And he turned around and walked out. And it was such a great leadership moment for him to take something that was meant as a negative and a hit on my leadership and decision that I had made, turned it around and turned it into something very positive. So that was just a great moment. Probably one of his finer moments in my mind about how he effectively could lead people.
Excellent. What a great story. Thank you for sharing that. That is really, really great to hear. Well, now we are going to open it up. Anybody that would like to ask a question, just please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask Scott whatever's on your mind.
Scott, this is Ed McGill of McGill Junkie Wealth Management. Thanks for all your stories today. I appreciate the candor, and that was great. Tiffany, we do want to see some pictures of Jay crawling around the floor looking for outlets or attacking bats and stuff. So we'll look for those posts. But Scott, for you, how did the executive team accept you? Because you were a part of them. There's probably positioning of others that would have wanted that role. So how did they accept that? And then as you look at your current executive team, are there positions that need to be filled or roles that need to change? And would those be from internal, external? Just kind of give us a outlook on your current executive team and how you feel about them.
Well, it's an interesting question because our executive team is actually in transition right now. Okay. Our previous structure, we had 2 executive vice presidents, and once I was appointed as CEO, we moved to a 5 executive vice president structure, which included a chief operating officer. And last month, right, it might have been earlier this month, we announced that this chief operating officer was retiring. So that has given us a chance to revisit that structure. He'll be retiring at the end of the year. And so we're moving to a 4 executive vice president structure, which prior to that, we had a chief operating officer, which basically had 70% of the organization that reported up through him, including all of our branch offices and all of the operational components. The other 3 or 4 executive vice presidents had more support functions reporting to them. So with this transition, I've realigned everything and given every one of my executive vice presidents, which we now have 4 after the retirement, realigned all the responsibilities with operations being shared across the leadership team. One thing that was very important to me when I became CEO is I wanted my executive leadership team to have exactly the same goals that I do. And my goals are focused on our 4 corporate priorities that we've established. And I asked the board to hold me. The board asked me what I wanted my goals to be. I said, I want my goals to be tied to our 4 corporate priorities and have specific components of those. But my executive team has the exact same goals. So we're all focused on exactly the same things. We have different ways of accomplishing them. But the problem with the alignment we had before was the fact that there was very little that each of the executive leaders could do to impact our operational results because they were more support functions. Yeah, long term, there was things they could do, but that more immediate impact. So with our new structure, every one of my executive vice presidents has direct responsibility in some way, shape, or form for an operational unit. And it's really been a great thing for us so far. We've been able to engage and empower people even more so because we don't have the expertise in those areas at the executive level, but it's really relying upon that next level of leader to really step up to the plate and carry the flags. Now, we at the same time we announced the chief operating officer's retirement, we also announced the retirement of our chief field officer and our chief financial officer. So we do have a couple of positions to fill. Currently, I'm in the market for a new chief financial officer and a chief marketing officer. So those two positions we'll consider internal candidates, but also looking for external candidates, preferably with some property and casualty experience that they can bring to the table and help us moving forward.
Thank you.
Jump in with a question here. Scott, thanks so much for joining us today. This has been really, really interesting and learning a lot here. You just mentioned some retirements and working to fill some positions, but there's a lot of discussion now about generational interaction in workplace, and boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z. What have you seen in your time as CEO, and even before that in EMC, in terms of how you are sort of leading various generations and a lot of change?
Well, that can be a big challenge, but I think a lot of it comes back to the inclusivity discussion. When we talk about inclusivity, we're not just talking about race or gender, we're also talking about generational, because everyone wants to be led differently. And there do tend to be some trends in the generational components of that. So it's really, for me, it's been trying to understand how each of the generations want to be led, what things they're passionate about, and then trying to engage them on those levels. We have a lot of people retiring, as I'm sure a lot of companies do, and that certainly creates some challenges in getting that experience and that knowledge passed down to the future leaders of the company. One thing that EMC has established, we've recently hired within the last couple weeks, actually, a succession planning specialist to come in and help us develop a plan and a process across the company of identifying high performers, getting them into some sort of leadership development program, which we kind of had a rough idea before, but not to the degree that it needs to be. So I believe that to really engage some of the different generations, we've got to give them a path. We've got to help them connect to EMC, help them understand where they fit into our corporate strategy, but also show them a path forward about, okay, what are you passionate about and how can we implement that and use that to help you grow and become a leader at EMC.
You had
Scott.
mentioned, oh, good.
Scott, this is Don Coffin with Bankers Trust. How are you? You talked about sending your folks home and working from home and how that's worked for you. I'm curious, and I'm always curious because we have to have some in the office, and we struggle with the amount and during feeling on the productivity of your folks from home versus being at work, and how do you see it playing out long term if you have an idea?
Well, we spent a lot of time talking about it. We've actually have surveyed our team a couple of times now, asking them when and if they'd like to come back, or if they come back, how much they want to come back. Do they want to be part-time in the office, full-time in the office, full-time at home? And the vast majority of our team said that they would like a hybrid, working some in the office and some at home. But we still have 30% that said they prefer just to work from home full-time in the future. So knowing that's going to change the dynamic of how we go forward. We had actually started plans to have a voluntary return to the office on February 1st. And with the rise in cases and everything that's happened over the past few weeks, we're probably going to dial that back some. or at least put it on hold until things settle down a little bit more. But the idea would be, I do believe it's important to get some people back in the office. I believe that COVID is a threat, but also is mental health. And we've got a lot of single employees that are working remotely that have little to no human contact, and would love to give them the opportunity to get in the office and at least have some human interaction somewhere along the line. If they want to, it wouldn't be mandatory, but voluntary. Still keeping social distancing in place, but getting them out of their house. I believe that's an important part for at least some of our team. We have a limited staff across the country right now. I think about 90 that are working in the office. Everyone else is working remotely. And we did continue paying like receptionists. We only have 2 receptionists on site now versus we normally had 6. So they're working and coming in, 1 or 2 days a week, each of them, and splitting their duties. But, we're still paying those team members who aren't working full time, just out of that's a decision we've just made to continue to, or plan to do going forward. Long term, I do anticipate we're going to see fewer people in the office. I expect that we'll probably go to some sort of hoteling arrangement for people who are splitting time between home and in the office. I expect that we will eventually decrease our footprint as far as square footage being used in our offices. We've got 4 buildings downtown now, and what that looks like in the future, I don't know. But maybe as we grow, we can grow back into it, even with employees and team members working remotely. But still a lot of things up in the air right now.
Hey, Scott. Dave Lito with Palmer Group. Thanks for your input and your comments. I do appreciate it. You talked a lot about a culture of trust, culture of inclusivity. What concerns do you have going to that hybrid model, or even having 30% of your workforce stay home? How that impacts your overall culture long term?
That certainly is a concern. I think it becomes very important we find ways of keeping people engaged, and it becomes more of a problem long term too when you are hiring people that have never been in the office. It's one thing if you've been in the office, you have those relationships, to maintain those relationships. It's another thing to build those relationships when you're working in a remote environment 100% and never actually been in person. But it's really a matter in my mind of leveraging the technology that we have to engage people. I think there's a higher level of trust now in our company than there was before, because we put trust in them to get their jobs done. We're not micromanaging. We're allowing them to work flexible schedules, work around school schedules, which is things that a lot of our managers weren't allowing before. Recognizing we still need to be there for agents when our agents need us, but extending that level of trust. The work from home with Scott videos have been, I think, a critical component in really further engaging our team, helping them develop a level of trust in the executive management team. I do bring in guests from across the country at times and have discussions with them, which has also been helpful. But it certainly does create a challenge. As far as an inclusivity thing, one thing I've been doing also this year is meeting with people across the country who have anniversaries. So a 15, 20, 25, 30-year anniversary, I'll host a meeting with 3 or 4 people, bring them in to a Zoom meeting. There's really no agenda other than tell me your favorite memory in EMC and then ask questions. And through that, I've got a lot of opinions on things. I've gotten people to speak up and share things. I try to create a trusting environment where they feel freedom to speak up. And a lot of them do. And there's actually been a number of things I've taken back. We've made changes almost immediately based upon some of the feedback that I've gotten. We had different areas where there was a lack of trust. And one person said something, I said, hey, can I follow up with you afterwards? So I followed up with him, got the scoop, and recognized that we had some policies in place that were really prohibiting people from feeling trusted. So the next day we took those away. And so I think it just becomes that much more important that we as CEOs and leaders of our companies, we find ways of connecting, not just with that next level of leader or the next level of leader, but with individual contributors across the country. I think that's really how you're going to connect and get that inclusivity.
Hi, Scott. Sherry Nielsen with Easter Seals, Iowa. I loved your transparency and your just vulnerability. I think that's awesome. I want to know, what are you reading right now?
What am I reading right now? A couple things on my desk right now, actually. One is, maybe you can't see it because I think Simon Sinek, The Infinite Game. I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek. He's a great communicator. One of the things that I implemented last year, with EMC, was getting us everyone on board with our company why. If you've ever seen Simon Sinek's 5-minute video on why, it's an incredible video. He's also got a book on the power of why. I encourage you to read that one as well. But that was kind of a game changer for EMC to get everyone on board with our company why. Our company why is to improve lives. That's why we exist. We exist to improve lives. We don't exist to make money or to sell insurance. We exist to improve lives, the lives of our policyholders, by providing them peace of mind, being there to pay our claims when claims are due, to help pick up a broom when the tornado comes through. We're there to improve the lives of our agents, to make their lives easier, to help them sell insurance faster and more efficiently, and to improve the lives of our team members. And so Simon Sinek is someone that I really I love, and I have just recently started The Infinite Game. Another one of his books is called Together is Better, and it's a very simple, easy to read. It's even got a scratch and sniff page, which is a lot of fun. But it's all one sentence tidbits about leadership, and you can flip through there, but they're very powerful statements. So that's also another book that I would say to pick up and look at occasionally. And we actually refer to that together a lot on our executive leadership team with the tagline, Together is Better.
Any other questions?
I'll ask one more, Scott. There's so much innovation and disruption in so many industries, and we talk about the future world of work. What do you sort of see as the future trends in the insurance industry, and how will that, you think, will impact your work, not only your workforce, but also sort of your just business strategy?
Well, let me brag on EMC a little bit first. Something I'm pretty proud of. We do an annual employee engagement survey, and 3 years ago, part of the employee engagement survey is a word cloud, and we ask people to describe the EMC culture. The most commonly used word 3 years ago was conservative. It's not bad, but it's not exactly what you want to hear as a leader of the company. 2 years ago, that transitioned after we had done a lot of work and investment in the insurtech innovation space. The number one word in our word cloud was innovative. So we went from being a conservative company to an innovative company in a matter of a couple of years, and that has continued to be a theme at EMC. We're very involved. We've really engaged our culture in innovation. We have what we call monthly innovation for breakfast meetings. We bring in startup companies from all over the country, allow them to speak to all of our team members that are invited. We have innovation labs. One of our most recent innovation labs was on diversity, equity, inclusion. And they brought forth a whole set of proposals and recommendations that we could implement to create a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment. We've also had labs on robotic process automation and on virtual reality, augmented reality. So we've actually implemented some of those things. The courthouse that was hit by a tornado in Marshalltown, we have a 3D or a virtual augmented reality headset we can put on. You can actually view all the damage, and we use that in training for adjusters when they come on board. I see a lot more in the future sensors and integration of risk improvement with insurance. We partner with a company called Make You Safe, which is based here in Moines. Gabe Glenn, if you've had a chance to meet him, great guy, but wearable technology within manufacturing plants to make a manufacturing plant safer. So it's good for the employees to keep people safer, good for their families, but also good for insurance. If we can reduce the risk within a manufacturing plant, it's a better risk for EMC to be able to write. So I see a lot more partnership of insurance companies with insurtech companies to reduce risk to make it a better risk. And a lot of concern existed at one point about insurtech companies trying to replace insurance. I think that's probably a challenge. I think there's probably a better opportunity for insurance companies to partner with insurtech companies and work together on innovation rather than competing with each other.
Thank you. Thanks, Jay, for that question, and everyone else who has participated today. Scott, a couple of rapid fire questions before we wrap up real quick, and these are just fun. The first is, what's your favorite restaurant in Des Moines or Greater Des Moines?
Well, the most common one that I go to is Chick-fil-A.
Excellent.
They've got
What's
great chicken, great fries, and good lemonade. But I also like Glen Oaks. Well, we eat there quite a bit.
Excellent. And your favorite food beyond Chick-fil-A?
I'd have to go with pizza. Any kind of pizza.
Excellent. Very good. How about your favorite TV show?
Well, I'm a CEO of an insurance company and I have 5 kids, so I could say what is a television, because I really don't have a lot of time to watch TV. But probably more than anything, I just love watching football games. I find myself, I can get caught up, and a lot of times I'll sit down with a football game, have my iPad or my laptop in front of me, be working and paying attention to a football game at the same time. So that's probably my favorite TV type of entertainment. But if I had to pick a show, I would probably choose Dateline. I love the kind of the mystery court cases and just watching to see how those things unfold.
Excellent. And final fun question here. You went to Iowa State, but is that your team?
I actually was raised a Hawkeye, but once I went to Iowa State and spent a couple of years there, I transitioned and became a Cyclone.
Very
I've been a
good.
Cyclone since.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Scott, so much. We're going to drop your contact information into the chat box for those that want to reach out to you directly. And I know we've had a few others that have had to hop off early. We'll follow up with them to make sure they have your contact information as well, including Tim Neligen, who looks like he's going to be moving here after the holidays. So hopefully you can help us introduce him to DSM. But thank you, everyone, for joining us. Scott, closing thought?
Well, again, thank you for the opportunity. Good to hear and see a few of you and get a chance to meet you. I would love to have more opportunities to connect with many of you, get to know you and get to know what you do within our community. Because to me, this was kind of a one-sided show today, just me babbling away, but I really like to get to know a lot of you better as well. But just a final thing I'll leave with everyone, and think something that I really focus on every day, is just to be intentional about our passions. As I mentioned earlier, I review my personal brand every day, and I look for opportunities to improve lives every day. And that's what really fills my bucket. And I would encourage each and every one of you to do the same. Look for opportunities to display your brand and to make a difference in people's lives. That's what I'm passionate about, and I encourage everyone else to do the same.
Excellent. Thank you, Scott, so much. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today for our very first Meet the CEO event. We will have another one in December, so be watching for that. Again, this is invite only for top-level execs. Appreciate each of you making time for this. And as Scott reminded us earlier, remember, together is better. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Thanks again, Scott. Bye.
Bye.